At last, I now have the components that I think I need to finish replacing the steering in this Ford 1700 with hydrostatic. Let me go show you what I've got.
Sitting here in the back of my truck are the components of a power steering kit from Jackson Power Steering. So they make kits to convert older tractors from manual steering over to power. And so this kit is actually customized for this Ford 1700. And it's even a unique Ford 1700 in that it had a power assisted recirculating ball gearbox, and the base plate to mount to the tractor is a little different. They customized this to support the fuel tank bracket. So this is elevated and different from the full manual gearbox. So this is what mounts to the tractor. The steering column itself is right here. This has been customized to have the tabs on it for the dash and the hand throttle. This is the hydraulic cylinder here. Came with a steering wheel bracket for attaching the fixed end of the steering cylinder. Here is the hydraulic unit itself and some hoses to go with this. This bag has the other hardwares.
I've investigated the hardware a little bit further, and these 4 Allen screws are for holding
The steering column up at the top of the steering control unit.
those. Each have a lock washer.
And then these bolts, these are hex bolts with a lock washer, are for holding the steering control unit down to the bracket that goes to the tractor on top of the clutch housing. This goes on the end of the hydraulic cylinder that goes to the front axle, which is here. And then this stopper nut, I basically backed up a little bit on this shaft so that I'll be able to screw that on over there. Having considered this base plate a little bit, I think my plan is going to be to mount the base plate in the tractor with the fuel tank bracket and bolt everything down. The reason for that is that you've got to be able to work a ratchet or a wrench to tighten the bolts down here underneath in this space. And if the steering unit is installed in there like this, on the bottom in this gap here is where all those hose ends need to connect. And so if all of that's there, you really just don't have a lot of room to work under there. Furthermore, to put those hose connections together, what I actually plan to do is keep this up, run the hoses through that hole there, connect them to the steering unit, and then bolt the steering unit in. That should give me the most room to work. And then I can assemble the steering column later. Here's where the base plate mounts on the tractor. We're going to use the original bolts from the old steering column. And you can see these holes here. Those were for some pins that went into the old steering column from the tractor frame here. And I actually took vice grips and worked those back and forth to pull them out so that this new plate can sit flush. Now my plan is I'm going to take a little bit of Permatex around here just to create a bit of a seal. So the old gearbox basically was painted in here, and I don't know if you could see it very well, but there's a slight lip there from where that had been painted after the gearbox was installed in the tractor. So that was sealed to prevent water from being able to get into this clutch housing. Not that much is going to get in there, but I just want to put a little bead of Permatex around here to kind of seal things up.
You probably saw that I put these washers in here because those base tubes were just a little oversized for this fuel tank support bracket. So
I wanted to make sure I wasn't just going to tighten down and pull the bracket down into those tubes and kind of flare the end. So I put those washers in there. The additional height that those give shouldn't be a big deal given we have these rubbers for the fuel tank. You can also now see why I wanted to put the bracket in first and keep that steering unit separate to put the hoses on. I've now run the hoses up through that center hole. On this side we have hoses labeled L and R. Those are going to go to the steering cylinder. And then going out the other side of the tractor, I've got hoses for P for the pump, E, which is the excess or the power beyond, and then T will return to the reservoir. So that's what's going out the other side, and the reason for that is that all of the other hydraulic lines for the tractor run down that other side of the frame, and then all of the tank returns and everything are back up here under the right-hand side of the seat as you sit in the seat facing forward. So the next step is going to be to go get the steering control unit and start making these connections. All right, so that was a bit more difficult than I thought, getting those hoses routed, because I had to make sure that they were routed such that they're going in the direction they need to go, and I need to avoid this area here because there's that vertical dash bracket that comes down and needs to bolt on here, so I can't have a hose coming out of there that's going to interfere with that bracket on either side. So I had to kind of work and then rework and adjust the angle on the hose. They are at different depths in terms of that distance there with the elbow so that you can kind of swing them past each other, but even still I ended up putting things in different places than I originally intended. I finally just got one going straight forward out between those two bolts, and one out that side forward, one out the other side kind of to the side forward, and then these two kind of coming forward, kind of avoiding this whole area back here behind where that dash bracket comes down. So a little bit tricky, but I've got it all in there. Now I just need to get this steering unit bolted to that base plate, and then this will be set and I can go work on some of the hydraulics over at the tractor. The steering unit is now fully bolted to the base. What I'm going to do now is just run these wires back onto this side like they belong. Then I'm going to start working on the hydraulic connections over there, the returns specifically. With respect to the hydraulics, here's what we're looking at. This is 3/8 MPT. That's going to go into the tractor for the return to tank. This is a T fitting with female swivels all the way around because I thought that would be the easiest in terms of fitting things up, lining things up, and installing, even though this is not the cheapest way to do this. What this will let me do is take the loader return, which is a 3/8 MPT line. This is also 3/8 MPT. I put this elbow on here. And then this is 3/8 MPT with a swivel, and so I'm going to put this adapter, which is a 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch, on the end of the return hose so that we can connect into this fitting. So the return is now hooked up with hydraulics. This hose is actually a little short. I would have liked to have routed it down underneath the step and out of the way. But I decided, given that it did reach going this way, I just didn't want to spend more money on another hose. So I zip tied it down there. That steel line right there is from the pump to the back of the tractor. And I zip tied it up there, right there in the corner to the same thing. And then if we swing over here, you can see where everything's going together there, right on the left. And that's where the T is. And then that hose kind of in the center there, that's actually pressure. That goes to the loader right now. So returns all on the left, you can see the T. So this is the loader return that's out here in the front, and then in the back on that T, kind of behind there, is where that steering return is coming in. So all that's now plumbed up. Just need to set up the cylinder and those hoses on the other side of the tractor and run pressure into the steering unit. There is one significant deviation from the instructions that I'm going to implement on the installation of this Jackson Power steering kit. What the instructions suggest is actually cutting this line here and taking the hydraulic pressure directly from this line, which comes out of the pump. This is the pressure line out of the pump. This is the suction line into the pump. So cut this. And then the kit came with the hoses with flareless connectors on it so that you'd cut and you'd put a connector on and run pressure directly to the steering unit. And then you'd bring the excess hose back and connect back to this line and then feed the tractor with the excess coming out of the steering unit. So the steering unit would basically be your priority flow valve, or would divert the flow appropriately. Instead, what I'm going to do is feed off the loader. Now, when I say feed off the loader, what I'm really going to do is I'm going to take this pressure line from the tractor into the loader valve. I'm going to remove it from the loader valve. I got an adapter for it, and I'm going to adapt it to the pressure hose on the steering unit. So the loader supply, instead of supplying the loader, is going to supply the steering unit. Then the steering unit excess is going to come back up and feed into the loader. So what's happening here is that the pump is going to feed the tractor first. So essentially the 3-point hitch gets fed first. And then the rest of the flow, instead of going to the loader like it does now, is going to go to the steering unit here. And then the excess from the steering unit will power the loader. According to Jackson Power Steering, the steering unit cycles about 1 gallon a minute of hydraulic flow through it all the time. The pump on this tractor at rated RPMs produces 7.3 gallons per minute, so we should have plenty of extra flow coming through the excess to still be able to power that loader. So if this doesn't work out well, I have the ability via the flareless connectors to cut that line. I just don't want to cut that steel line, because if I do, there's no going back because the parts are no longer available. So here it is hooked up, the original pressure line from the loader hooked into the pump line or pressure line into the steering unit. And then the excess line from the steering unit is now routed up into the loader valve. I will probably mess around with how these are oriented and arranged and zip tie things together once the fuel tank and the dash are back in here and I can see where it's going to be the best place to kind of tie them off. So let me explain what's going on here. I actually painted the cylinder blue to match the tractor. I also painted the steering column blue to match the tractor, since these will be visible. But what we have set up here is the end of the ram is bolted, and this is not tightened, it's just through the element at the wheel. The wheel is turned hard left, so if you can see that, that's hard left, and the ram is fully extended. To extend it, I just loosened these caps to let air in there, and I was able to extend that ram. What this does is it lets us see where this end of the cylinder wants to land in terms of a mounting bracket. So the mounting bracket's here, and this needs to mount on the loader frame. And so my thought is I'm going to put it right there, and then mount the cylinder right on it there. So I'm actually going to bolt this bracket in place. So I'm going to need to drill some holes here in the loader frame. And it turns out, if you look at the bracket, the hole is up there, but the best spot is really right there based on the shape of this thing that came with the kit. So I'm just going to drill a new hole here to be able to mount this up. And so once all this is mounted, what happens is if you turn the wheels hard to the right and retract the cylinder fully, this end of the cylinder should be in the same location. This cylinder for this tractor has 7 inches of travel, which is the travel that the pitman arm had coming out of the old steering box. That's a very important measurement to get so that you can get the correct length travel here on the hydraulic cylinder. I had a little trouble getting this set up in here because I didn't have enough room for the hoses to come straight out the side, and I couldn't orient it with the ports to the top, so I ended up going out and getting a couple elbows to connect to those hoses so that they can fit right in there, and then I zip tied the hoses together to kind of keep them off of chafing anywhere. This is now all bolted up, so we are all connected up. The only thing left now is to put on the steering column, put the dash back together, and get this machine running and check it for leaks. Got everything going, got air out of the steering unit. I haven't observed any leaks yet. I did go for a test drive. It's raining, so I'm a little wet now, but having just gotten it together, couldn't not take it for a little drive. So definitely drives pretty nice. Time to put it to work. Next time it's dry out, and then I'll be able to comment more about how this Jackson Power steering system operates. But from my test drive, everything was real smooth and buttery soft in terms of turning the wheel and turning corners. So, success with this project.